We are now in the promotion season for 2021, and I usually welcome any help that I can get. So I like to also offer help where I can. So I've decided to do one or two presentations on a few topics. This first presentation will be about property offenses, and I'll be focusing on the criminal code and its amendments, particularly section 102 to 232. But for this particular presentation, I will be looking at the offense of theft. Now, the criminal code covers various property offenses in the sections that I mentioned earlier: theft, burglary, aggravated burglary, robbery, obtaining property by deception, handling stolen goods, so on and so forth. But today we'll be looking at theft. So let's go right into it. What is theft? The criminal code explains that a person is guilty of theft if he dishonestly appropriates property belonging to another with the intention of permanently depriving the other of it. And thief and steal shall be construed accordingly, meaning essentially that they should have the same meaning. Or you could use this definition to say what is stealing or who is a thief. That's essentially what it means. Now, the offense of theft has five distinct elements. If any one of them is missing, then the offense is not made out and it becomes something else. There is dishonesty and there is intention to permanently deprive the owner. These two elements, we could consider them mens rea. Well, they are in fact mens rea because they are the mental element. And then you have appropriation, property, and belonging to another, which are actus reus elements, right? So there we have it, actus reus, and we have mens rea. Five of them, two mens rea, three actus reus elements. The offense is made out. Now let's explain them a little more. Dishonesty, which is a mens rea as we said before. It is easier when looking at the offense of theft to consider when is a person not dishonest than when they are honest. So the criminal code lays out three circumstances in which a person is not dishonest. And let us look at them. A person is not dishonest if they appropriate property with the belief that the owner cannot be found by taking reasonable steps. An example perhaps would help here. So you walking in the street, you find a wallet. There's no identification card in it. There's only a $5 note. It's a busy street. It could belong to anybody. You believe that it is impossible to find the owner. So you take the $5 note and you spend it. The law is saying here that if you had the honest belief that you could not have found the owner by taking reasonable steps, then you have not acted dishonestly. The second one says that if you take property, if you appropriate property with the honest belief that the owner would have consented if he knew of the circumstances you were in at the time and of the fact that you're taking it, that the owner would have consented. It's the belief. Now, it matters not if the owner turns up later and says, hey, I didn't give you my property. I would not have given you my property. It doesn't matter. What matters is that at the time when you took it, you believe that the owner would have consent. Now, imagine a situation where you have an emergency at home because your wife is going to give birth and you need to get her to the hospital. You go to your car and your car cannot start because your battery is dead. But you know where your neighbor keeps her keys for her car. Go there, you take it because at the time you believe that the owner would have been okay with you taking the car because of the situation, the circumstances, and of the fact that you're taking it, right? And then the third situation is where you believe that the property belongs to you. Now, many people purchase similar items. Imagine that you purchase an iPhone and you buy a black case with something like a BVI flag on the case. And then somebody does the same thing. You're at a particular place and you pick up the phone thinking it was yours. As it turned out, it's not yours. Then you have not stolen that. You have not acted dishonestly. Now, it's quite a different situation where if you later determine that the phone is not yours and you still keep it, then clearly that's a different situation. Yeah. Now, you must note well here that you can be dishonest if you take property and at some later stage you decide that you're going to pay for it, right? You can still be dishonest and be charged with theft if all the other elements are satisfied. Okay? Now, I would encourage you to do some more reading by yourselves because this can take a while to get your heads around. Certainly, it was for me. So, I would encourage you to do the same thing. Okay? This takes us to the second element of theft, which is appropriation. And appropriation here means any assumption by a person rights of the owner. Any assumption of the rights of the owner. In other words, you take somebody's property and you treat it as your own. It is important to note here that any rights does not equate to all rights. You don't have to take all the rights of the owner. You could go and do some reading on R.V. Morris by yourselves. But essentially, what this case is about, a lady went into a supermarket and switched the label on a particular item of goods. Then she came out with it. She was charged with theft and she claimed in her defense that she paid for it. And therefore she did not appropriate it because she paid for it. And the court held that she assumed some of the rights of the owner in that she paid in part, right? And therefore appropriation did take place. Second case law, Lawrence v. MPC 1972, speaks about appropriation when you had consent. The facts of this case was an Italian student went to the UK and there were some language issues as the student took a taxi to go somewhere. The student handed her wallet to the taxi driver who took more money than he should have taken for the fare. And the court held that he appropriated property because he took more than he should, notwithstanding the fact that he got consent to take money from the wallet. I hope that is clear. Belonging to another. It says here that property, this is the third element, I should say. This is the third element of theft we're looking at. Section 207. Property shall be regarded as belonging to any person having possession, control, or proprietary interest in it. This implies that there are three kinds of owners, three categories of owners. You have possession owner because you have possession of the thing. If you lend me your car and the car is stolen from me, then for the purpose of the theft offense, I am the owner. You have control owner. If you take your computer to BVI Communications to be repaired and it's stolen from there, then for the purposes of the theft report, the person who owns BVI Communication Limited was the owner of the computer at the time. And of course, you have the proprietary owner, which would be the person who has the title or the receipt, the person who purchased it, and therefore they would be the proprietary owner. Now, for theft, it is not necessary to prove who was the ultimate owner. Depending on the circumstances of a given case, you can deal with the possession owner, the control owner, or the proprietary owner. But it's important to understand that ownership is not just who, it is not related only to the person who bought the thing. It can be any of the above. And here I want you to consider, can you steal your own property? Yes, in fact, you can steal your own property. And this case law fleshes it out very well. Um, Turner took his car to a garage to be repaired. He had a spare key, and at some point later, he went back using the spare key and took the car and stole the car. And he was convicted for stealing his own car because at the time, the car belonged to the possession or the control owner, not the proprietary owner, if you get what I mean, right? Lastly, we will look at the element of intention to permanently deprive. Now, you could read all of this by yourself. You could go to the Criminal Code section 208 and look at it. But essentially, what I want you to understand here, that intention to permanently deprive also includes temporary um, deprivation of the property. So even if you take something from someone and you intend at some point to return it, the fact that you deprived the owner of it at the time when you had it or during the time when you had it means that you had intention of permanently depriving the owner, right? And there are case laws which you could look at. And it is worthwhile pointing out here, according to Section 204 of the Criminal Code, that a person steals despite a willingness to pay or to return things. You still steal. Imagine someone having a ticket to go and watch a football game and you steal the ticket, right? And you go to the game, or you just steal it because you want to be malicious. And then at some point later, you bring it back to the person. The game is already gone. It is of no use to the person because they cannot now go and watch the game. So you have permanently deprived the person of the property. Right? Well, thank you much for your kind attentiveness. I hope this was helpful, um, and I wish you well.